Cool. And, all right, cool. So today we are talking about EA on speed. So the idea to use design and enterprise design sprints and the Milky Way map to speed up enterprise architecture practice. And yeah, this is us. I'm Milan. I'm
Hi.
So this is all the highs and hellos and everything that makes sense in the countries we're in. So I'm Milan. I'm based in Paris, and I'm founding partner of EDA, Enterprise Design Associates.
I'm Annika. I'm based in Stockholm or south of Stockholm, and I'm a partner of IRM Sweden. We've been working with business architecture for a long time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was my line for this picture. We've been around since 1982 with business architecture, business development, and software development, and are in the training and consultancy mix. So we do a lot of method development and thinking around how can we do business architecture and developing better enterprises. That's what we do.
Right, and Enterprise Design Associates is organized as a network. So we connect independent experts and consultancies with enterprises, by which we mean corporate, startups, and public organizations for innovation and transformation by design. And we do that by doing projects together, running workshops, training, mentoring, and facilitating the network, and also a global conference series called Intersection every year. So the first question in the webinar we already did, we asked the audience, so we will just reuse their answers conveniently, was why do you think Amazon is so successful? And it's not just because it's selling our book Intersection, but there are many things that come to mind when you ask different people, also people from different disciplines, why is this so successful? Why is this enterprise so successful? And you can think what you want about Amazon, whether they are doing something good or bad, whether you want to buy from them or not. They are having a tremendous success with their enterprise. So why is that? So these are the answers we got from our webinar audience last time. So you have things like technology and innovation. They have focus on the customer, great customer service, good brand. They can adapt. They have a broad range of products that you actually find. The transactions are easy. The operations run well. The stuff actually arrives. And all of that is true. So in the theory of enterprise design, we basically say that in order to make an enterprise successful, you have to be conscious about which of these aspects you prioritize, which of these are really important and you invest in, and also make them coherent. How you deal with technology, how you innovate, how you focus on the customer, how you design your experience, your interactions, how you build your platform, how you operate, how you organize yourselves. All of these things are part of a bigger picture. And then has to be translated into the detailed design decisions, which correspond to all the little icons you see on the book. And this is what we will use later on in this webinar to navigate enterprise challenges and designs. So what is enterprise design? We define it as the missing bridge between product and service design and the execution into the enterprise. So designers are really good at designing journeys and experiences and coming up with innovative ideas and prototyping them and testing them. But the enterprise that needs to execute these ideas and implement them and actually make them real consists of processes, organization, lots of stakeholders with their agendas and enterprise architecture. And the idea is that we need to actually integrate this in order to deliver on any great design. And we also need to actually consciously design the enterprise in order to deliver something great. So enterprise design is the bridge between designing something great and executing it in an enterprise. And this has a lot to do with design thinking. This is a picture from IDEO, who actually came up with that idea of design thinking. And when you go to see our clients and talk to them about design thinking, they often show us this kind of room. where you have lots of post-its full of colors, full of field research results, some guy all dressed all in black, cool designer explaining things, what they found, creating empathy for the users and so on. And we also have often the skeptical guy, like the guy on the left, who looks at the stuff and thinks, wow, this is all interesting, but where's my roadmap? Where is my architecture? Where are my constraints and my requirements, my specifications, my backlog, my roadmap, and so on.
And so, my legacy, all the legacy that is behind all these nice surfacey things.
Yes, so we often have this situation that design thinking comes up with a lot of ambition, but then the people in the enterprise who know the enterprise are like, oh, are we able to do this? Can we actually, do we have the data? Is our organization able to change this stuff? Who will pay for this? And so on. And this is where we get closer to the original meaning of design, of which we think enterprise design is a variant or specialization. So design is about, it's really, really hard work, because you have to look at all the constraints that matter. You have to make models from many different directions, and you have to find in this space of almost seemingly unlimited opportunities, a design that you find good. That's basically what you do if you go to design school every day for 4 years, is you make stuff. You go to design school, and your professors and your peers and these kind of committees, like here in this architecture class, they will basically squash your idea and say why it's bad, and you go home and you do it again. And doing that after 4 years, for 4 or 5 years, you are a designer. So how can we use this kind of approach that really depends on critique and prototyping and multiple perspectives, and not shying away from the complexity and the hard questions for something as dynamic and complex as an enterprise? Is there a way that we can prototype, model, discuss, have critique? And you might notice that this room actually does not have any post-its. So what is good design? Dieter Rams came up with the 10 principles for good design some time ago, saying it's innovative, it's useful, it's aesthetic, understandable, unobtrusive, honest, long-lasting, thorough, environmentally friendly, and as little design as possible. This was obviously made for products. And if you look at enterprises, we find that we can still ask the same question, like, is this enterprise well designed? If the answer is yes to all of these questions, if the enterprise is innovative and, for example, environmentally friendly, if people understand it, if it's aesthetic, if you find it, it's useful, it's honest, and so on, then it's a good enterprise design. And we see lots of examples where enterprises fall short of this, like this example of a mobility enterprise producing this pile of waste. And it's not because anyone was evil and said, I really want to produce this pile of waste. It was because some externality, some operational detail, some development in the way the enterprise executed a design, which was a product design and its realization, kind of went into the wrong direction and produced this result, which is clearly undesirable. So there was an update in 2017 for the tech industry of the principles. And this is the problem that designers find themselves in today often, is good design. We know what good design is, but the actual design we are making, the actual outcome of the enterprise activity, is often the opposite of it. And we often find ourselves in this short-term project or product-oriented cycles, where we are just designing towards some short-term tactical goals and losing sight of the big picture, and in the end producing something that is actually bad. And enterprises are really important in the world. So just if we look, for example, at the current crisis, all of these enterprises are involved in dealing with it. If you look at the healthcare ecosystem, you have, of course, patients, but then you have all the enterprises like insurance companies, hospitals, healthcare providers, education, life science companies, pharma companies, international organizations, governments. And we all have to deal, we all have to change things make new offerings, change processes, change organizations, work together in order to have an impact. And how can we design these enterprises to be actually useful and to actually deliver something better?
And it's not only about the, it's not only about the enterprise, it's also about understanding the ecosystem into which we would like to add something new or change something. So we need to be able to navigate all these things, and that is tricky. And usually you scope that away, or you try to make it tangible, and then you make it too narrow, which is one of the problems, at least from the architecture point of view. So.
And we will get to the IT architecture.
Yeah.
Yes. So just so we have this hashtag #endorg, which depicts awkward enterprises. So if enterprises go bad and produce something that is definitely awkward, if not straightforwardly bad. And if you ever wonder how does that translate into your daily life, this is how it could look like. What it could look like. This is me trying to get a package delivered in Paris, and I get this page made by FedEx, who invests a lot into design and architecture and operations and everything. And they give me this saying, it's not being delivered. I can watch it go around Paris. I can track it. I can favorite it. I can request notifications to get notified. I can track more. And I can't actually tell them where I live, when I'm home, or anything like that. So the only useful feature has not been part of the brief. Why? Because these designers realizing this didn't get the right brief. No one actually thought about what the customer actually needs at this point. But you also see something different, which is the bottom and the top part of the page are talking to me in French, the rest of the page in English, because one department decided that the browser language is really important when deciding what language to talk to a user. And the other department decided it's the IP address location. So you have basically a schizophrenic enterprise persona talking to me in 2 languages, being absolutely useless, and translating an organizational divide, a silo, into different systems, different responsibilities that then renders actually as a web design or as a website. So if you are a product designer, and you wonder what is the impact of bad enterprise design on the services, on the products, and on the experiences you design, this is a good example. And you see on top, we collected some icons from the intersection book and the enterprise design stack that are relevant here, like experience, services, and touch points, interaction design, and science. There are other examples of enterprise awkwardness. For example, this one where we are more looking into structure, technology, architecture, and function. And this is a model that has been produced by an enterprise architect in the Danish government as a model to scare people. So basically he pulls it out whenever someone wants to change something significant in the enterprise. It shows all the IT systems and their interrelations, how they are coupled and how they depend on each other. And he can basically ask, what do you want to change? Are you sure?
And I said, this is a way of using enterprise architecture in an awkward way. This is not helping us. This is probably making things harder, because there is probably a better way to draw this, to see the dimensions and the dependencies in a better way. But like you said, the purpose is to frighten people and to make them back off and not disturb this guy. So for him, it's working, but for him as a part of the bigger system, this is not a good way of working. So this is definitely something, enterprise architecture awkwardness almost.
Can I just chip in there? We do talk about the scary spaghetti diagram a lot.
Yeah.
And identified it as a very useful artifact. But the way enterprise architects typically use it is to get them to invest in enterprise architecture.
Yeah.
Not to say don't do things, but do more enterprise architecture.
Yeah, that could be another result of it. Yeah, but I do think that it's kind of an not honest way of doing it, because you could do with what you have. You probably have less spaghetti than you think, but you have not put in the effort of actually doing the diagrams better. That is at least my experience when going into organizations, having a spaghetti diagram, then you depict them and you realize, okay, yeah, it's not perfect. It's never perfect, but it's not as bad as you have drawn them. But at least my starting point. I'm trying to be optimistic.
But doing enterprise architecture is about drawing those better diagrams. So if what you've got is the spaghetti diagram, and then you can say, well, what we need to do is present this in a more meaningful way, and agree on what the different sort of abstractions are. That's a useful, it's a very useful outcome.
It is.
From a design point of view, if the Danish government wants to change something, for example, to respond to a crisis, this diagram is really important because it depicts reality of all the information they have on the citizens, for example, and how it's actually working. So, I think we can design the best services and products and experiences, but if we ignore this reality, it will never happen. So what we need to do is to basically untangle this knot or spaghetti and put it into something that we can actually work with. And that's basically what we're talking about today.
Exactly. And it has to, like Sally, it has a point of trying to see if we can do something about the complexity. Is it complicated or is it complex? And if it's only a bad sorting thing, then we can find patterns that will help us. But we will probably find things where we do not really know, where we need to remove things and have an idea of what would a better designed way of dealing with this be, and then try to evolve on that. So, yeah.
So there have been many attempts to design better enterprises. This is one from TOGAF, where you have different layers of Archimate in this case, and different steps, and going from vision to change in this cycle, working through the requirements. This is how enterprise design and architecture is handled today in many enterprises. And one of the main points of critique that we hear is it's too slow. So we're not saying this is wrong, but the approach that we are presenting today is basically an alternative, or it's even it can be a complementary to speed up crucial parts of enterprise architecture practice and get agreement on change fast and translate it into execution.
And I would even argue that this is, by doing the different layers, you're adding a lot of complexity and a lot of, layers and clouds for the overall understanding of what we're actually dealing with. So this is, I'd say this is not helping us in the overview. It could help us further down the line figuring out what's what, but to work through the layers is, in my experience, adding, problems for us, which I will show you later. So
kind of at the same time, a lot of things at the same time, I think things are missing, like the organization, the customer, the product, and so on. But like if your organization uses this method, it's fine. The only challenge is to connect a more fast, global, holistic approach to the kind of initiatives that are running this and that are planned this way. So what's missing? We feel the enterprise is often the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. We even heard stories of enterprise architects being actively shunned on the floors of organizations because they always bring the problems and the difficulties when planning any change. So the enterprise is often a little bit like the elephant on the right. It's not being acknowledged, even though it is in the room. And if it's in the room, all the people around are these blind people, and everyone looks at their own perspective of the enterprise, saying, "Oh, it's all the product. It's all about people and what they think and agile mindsets and stuff like that." No, it's all about the services. No, it's all about the architecture and the IT. No, it's all about the organization and how we do teams. No, it's all about finance and numbers. And they're all right, because all of this is part of the enterprise elephant, but no one actually sees the whole thing. So this is something that what we're going to present aims to resolve. So how to design better enterprises, how to do it actually. We combine as a theoretical foundation of enterprise design two main theories. One is the ambidextrous organization, which means enterprises need to, at the same time, innovate and transform themselves. Innovate in the sense of create and adopt something new, not necessarily something new for the world, but something new for them. And transform means changing what already exists. And this is not only stuff on the inside, like your processes and your organization, but also relationships, for example, to customers or suppliers or partners. What is design doing? Design is uncovering opportunities for change and developing solutions, and making this future solution visible. And the enterprise itself behaves in this picture as a complex system, which means a tiny variable change can send the entire system into an entirely new direction, which at the same time is very good for us, because if we show the right model at the right time in the right workshop to the right person, we can actually do that. But it also means every approach that pretends that we can plan details into 5 years will actually not get us there. So the enterprise is this Rubik's Cube of different aspects, and we need to find a way to unpack this and navigate it and see where are the links and where are the connections. And we do that by chunking it into different layers, looking either at the big picture, which is big opportunities, integrated solutions, disruptive innovation, system-wide transformation and change, and making the link to the very small, incremental, isolated instances of enterprise reality, which is what we call the rendering. So everything that you can actually see and be in touch with and use, all the screens and rooms and websites and apps and logos and so on. And in between, we have the other aspects that help us bridge that divide, that are conceptual aspects like content, touch points, functional or structural requirements, people and personas, business models, interaction designs, and so on. And the goal is that we don't, or the idea is we don't have to look at all of these 20 aspects across the entire spectrum, but be conscious about which ones matter right now. Be sure that we make the link to the big picture, so the green ones, which is who we are, what all of this is about, what the role is that we play in people's life, and how everything fits together in an architecture. And the rendering, like how does this actually come to life, and choose proactively which aspects will help us make this connection and understand what we have, what needs to change, and how we want to change it and how we get there. So the approach we are presenting is we look at everything that matters, not at everything, but everything that matters. We take a bite-sized chunk of the enterprise. We assemble a team that can work on this. And we work on incremental delivery using fast feedback. And the design sprint that we are using today, or talking about today, is basically a means to do so, together with the maps that we will talk about now. So that's the first thing, the first ingredient we need to speed up EA through enterprise design, a shared vocabulary and a shared understanding of what it is we are talking about when we're talking about the enterprise. Let's talk about a single map.
Exactly. So I guess you've all been to meetings like this when somebody is describing something, maybe a change, maybe a problem, maybe an opportunity or something, and there are a number of people sitting around the table, and that person goes blah, 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 and describes everything. And the next slide kind of shows what everybody after this little speech has in their head. Can you press next? No. Then you see that even though we have the same vocabulary, the same words, most of the people have somewhat their own idea of what does this actually mean for us, depending on, based upon their previous knowledge, their positions, their areas of responsibility, or whatever that could be, like what's bringing them to those conclusions. So somebody's thinking about this new idea that that person described, that how would that work in our current processes? Another one would argue or thinking of, does this really sort of work with the strategies that we just discovered or just decided upon? And a third one can have the product portfolio, the initiative change portfolio, and saying, yes, brilliant idea, but there are no capacity to do anything for the next 18 months. So why are we even having this conversation like this? And the fourth one can have something around organizational change. Yeah, maybe this idea is brilliant, but it's gross, it's never going to work. Or that department is already so busy with all the changes that goes on that so that there is no idea, there's no way that they can even start thinking about this. So that's the challenge that we have. I mean, with all these different things going on, there could be another point in this meeting, and that could be that one of the people around the table is presenting themselves, saying, okay, I'm from Fiumicino, I'm near Rome in Italy. And after this, we would probably have the same kind of models, or the same kind of pictures in our head, namely a geographical map. And the map, they will probably not be the same, because depending on how much you know about Europe or about Italy, you would zoom in to different levels of the map. Somebody who's only been to, I don't know, Europe once or something might have a vague idea of where Italy actually is, and somebody who has a bit more knowledge about Europe has a better idea of Italy and can find the booth-shaped country in the south there. And if you've even been to the city, you can have the details of even how the canals look. But they're based upon the same mental model, and they're anchoring from the shared understanding of how we navigate the geography together. And the take that we have here is, could we use this knowledge and this ability that we all have on navigating on maps when we address the challenges of an enterprise with all these different dimensions going on at the same time? You can take the next picture. So we asked the participants on the webinar, what are the maps that you're using when you are working with your enterprises in different change initiatives or different ways of understanding what's going on, or understanding what is it that we have here. So these were a lot of architects, so capability maps is not surprisingly the top one, but process maps, domain data models, customer journeys, personas, there are a number of them. And depending on where you come from and what tradition you have in your, what you're used to, you're going to probably start with something around your favorite map or something. But the challenge is that none of these things are wrong. It's just they are a dimension of what we're trying to understand, a dimension of the elephant, if you like. So what we've been doing for quite a long time in this way of modeling that we call the Milky Way is to see, can we take the logic and the idea around physical maps of geographies into a map of something as abstract as an enterprise. And starting to thinking about this, we needed to find the north and south and east and west of this. And it took us a while, but when we thought of it, we realized that the overall value flow of an organization, of an enterprise, is stable as long as you have the kind of the same business going on. And we said that that could be the center of this map. So here is a really simplified example of a training organization offering classes to professionals. So they have, first step is to plan all the classes that they are going to offer. Then they productify them, they create all the courses that they want to offer, they market them, they sell them, they deliver them, then they follow up. And then in the section in the bottom, there was a strategic step where they would evaluate, okay, is this according to what we want to do? Do we want to improve something? Do we see any opportunities? Should we develop something else? So this is like the basic geography of it. And if we zoom out and take the next picture, we start to add things. And this approach is partly a reaction against all the detailed architecture models and all these discussions on levels and details and all of that. So this is really hands-on, and our first question is, what is being done in the different sectors? So what do you do when you plan? And then you ask them, and then you find a number of, you could say, activities. For those of you who are architects, it's the beginning of capabilities, but we don't tell that unless there are some architects in the room to make them comfortable with what's going on. And the next thing that we ask is, what systems are you using when you do the things that you do? So we would anchor into the actual existing IT applications or IT systems, business systems that are vital for each of these activities. And this is a way of making sure that we're not losing out on a large number of important steps, but also kind of anchoring in one of the kind of tragically, but one of the most tangible parts of an organization, which is the IT systems. I work in the CRM system. I work in the I don't know, finance EPR system or whatever. So those are things that people really know, like that's me, kind of. So it's a way of both making sure that we haven't forgotten anything and making people a bit more secure that, okay, I know that these are things that I remember, I know that I work here. And the third question that we ask when we build these maps is, what information do you use when you work with the tasks in this sector and in the system that you are supported by? And once you know that, then you can ask, what information do you need from someone else to be able to start doing your things? That would be like the information upstream, if you like, in the process. And what information are you providing to others when you are when you're done? Who is interested in the result of your activities? And by doing this, we kind of tie them all together with the information flows. So now we have a fairly good starting point. Pretty internal, one would say, but we'll come to that. So you can just take the next one. So for those that are a bit worried that we are leaving all the usual architecture dimensions or things behind, that's not the case, because if we were to add the processes here, like you can just press the next one, you would find the planning, the design, the prepared, marketing and sale, delivery and everything. So we have created one map with all these dimensions that we usually, in the more traditional way of doing architecture, would need 3 different maps for. A process map, an information map, and maybe an application map. So this is the way of combining them. And we do that by this way of modeling and using the capability as a basis for it. So we combine everything you need in order to do or to perform a specific task. So the system, the people, the knowledge, everything you need in order to do something would be one of these gray boxes. So now we have this internal map, and they could look something like that if you have a bit more details. So you find the same sectors, and we have just expanded a bit more about on the capability part. So these are all the things that this business needs to be able to do in order to deliver the classes. But we're delivering to somebody, and that somebody is really important to know something more. Exactly, yeah. We had the little icons. So what we can say before we move into the customer point of view on this, we can just say that we are able to use the stack and the different dimensions and different perspectives on a map like this. So we can say, okay, we're interested in the services dimension, or we're interested in the way that the operation works, or it's like the base model of the architecture. So this really works well with the stack and the thinking around that. And then, like I said, it started out, and that's like the story of the Milky Way. So it started out fairly internal, but after a while we realized that you cannot just focus on your inside, you need to understand what's going on outside. So what we do is that we add the customer journey outside, and then we map the different connections to the internal capabilities from the touch points. So this is a way of combining this external point of view outside and in with a fairly good map of the inside and how we work together. So the bridge that Milan talked about in the beginning is something that we can see here. And getting the ability to use, again, the geography of placing the customer journey and the map together gives us a fairly fast, intuitive picture of what's going on and where are the different important connections that we need to understand. So this is the really short introduction to the map. And now we're going to use it, right?
Yes. So now we have a shared vocabulary with the stack. We have a single map that we can use for the enterprise, including the customer perspective and the internal perspective and how they are tied together. Now, what if we want to change something? There, the approach we're using is an enterprise design sprint for rapid co-design with everyone who needs to be involved. Just as a context, so a design sprint is something that has been introduced by Google Ventures originally to do this exact shortcut. So if we have a great idea for something, we want to, in the workshop, learn whether that is a good idea, rather than going and building it and launching something and then learning whether it's a good idea. It's basically GV's method that they taught their startups in order to avoid investing too much time and effort into the wrong ideas. And the wrong idea that can be because the market might not want it, but also because it's not feasible or because we are not the right people to do it, or any other reason. So this is why we have to combine all the questions and all the aspects that are important to do this validation check. Is this idea actually good? Can we learn quickly whether it's a good idea or what's missing or how we can iterate it before actually engaging into building it? So this is what we're doing in a sprint. This is, by the way, of 13 people from our webinar, how many already attended or ran a design sprint. And remember, these are enterprise architects. So just if you have never heard of a design sprint, some of your colleagues will have. So what's a design sprint? So this is the original model. There are many models. If you Google design sprint and you click images, you will get many different models. So this is the very first one from the book Sprint, where you map something and understand on Monday, you sketch solutions on Tuesday, you decide which one you want to pursue on Wednesday, you build a prototype on Thursday, and you test it with users or customers on Friday. So you go from a challenge to actually learning in 1 week. How do we do that? So the first step is to scope and define an ambitious challenge. So Google says basically, instead of saying, okay, how can we introduce the next release of this software that we are using, we would ask, how might we, for example, significantly improve the customer experience by better operations or something like that. So aim high, aim far in order to get somewhere significant. In the sprint, basically figuring out how to. So what we are doing before the sprint is scoping and defining this challenge, do the basic map of the enterprise. This is a map on a paper that has been created in, I think, about an hour, about what an enterprise is doing. And we look at what are the aspects that we think might be the most relevant ones to look at in the sprint in more detail, and which ones are at the periphery. On Monday, we understand. So we take all the map, all the insights that we have from the user about the enterprise, the existing models that exist, about the processes, about the applications. We take what the market might want or need. Depending on the challenge, we might also do surveys with customers or internal organizations. We do stakeholder interviews, and we make these initial maps of the enterprise to have something to work with and to get to a common understanding. Even if our sprint team is really large, we try to bring them together and have one shared reference to work from, and share all the really important insights that we want to work with. On Tuesday, still on Monday, actually, we start mapping. So this is an example of a virtual map made in Klaxoon in this case, but you can use basically any kind of virtual tool. This is a map that has been created by our students from Jönköping University fairly quickly in one of these tools in, I think, about half an hour, about a French manufacturer of climbing equipment. And you see you have the structure, you have the customer experience, you have some how might we's, so challenges formulated, what we want to improve. You have the capabilities, you have even the channels encoded that they are using at the touch points. And if you do that in person, it looks like at the bottom left. So basically people mapping together, what is it that we know about the enterprise and what is it that we need to transform and change? Where does this innovation happen that we are aiming for? On Tuesday, we look at that map. Yes?
I was just saying, and then if you're in a setting where there already is a map, then of course you have a head start of actually not being forced to, in the sprint, to design the map as well. So this is maybe an example of if you were to use this training company and come up with a number of how might we's. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So this is what it looks like then on Tuesday when we all had a night's sleep and thought about the challenges. We in this case, for example, this is a template where we map the customer experience and the touch points to the existing map of the architecture, and we can add things that we might want to change in order to tackle the challenge, and what aspects are the most important ones to help us with that. Is it people? Is it the actor relationship? Is it the interaction design, functional requirements? What is it? What perspective will help us? And in the physical realm, we basically have little stickers to do that. We start sketching solutions. So one way to do that is to take a moment of the enterprise. So basically slice of the map and look at that from the customer perspective, from the internal perspective, from an IT and organization perspective, and draw what needs to change. How will this change look like? In this case, with a very classic Google design sprint method called Crazy 8. So sketching 8 ways to tackle this challenge, 8 ideas in a very short time. And we will then basically pin this to the map and see how can we illustrate this change and make it tangible so that we can actually test it.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, we know all the options and we need to decide what we want to do. So we take a look again at the map and our solutions, and we zoom in and explore which are really the opportunities that we want to go for. Where is the sweet spot between what we know the customer really wants because of market insights, or what our users, our internal people really want, what we really can do well because of our capabilities, our processes, our knowledge, our systems that we have in place, and what is the exact scope of this change, how much effort is it, how much value will it bring, and basically come up with a short list of the most interesting initiatives to pursue that we want to take on into the next day into the prototyping.
And this has also a lot to do with what are the internal dependencies that we need to be able to understand. There is always something around how you design the product that will affect how you're able to deliver it. And even though people know that, there is always a lot of discussion on how those dependencies, what they look like, and how can we drive them in a better way. So this is a way of understanding and coming up with good solutions for the internal work as well. I mean, if we really want to have this customer experience, then we need to change how we design the products, change, I don't know, price models or way of how they're constructed or how they combine or whatever. And that is usually not in the exact point where the customer journey meets in the internal organization. That's a few steps away. And we need to understand that in order to know what to change on the inside. So that's one of the big things from the architecture point of view, at least, understanding the dependencies.
Yes, and depending on the challenge, you might also ask who is doing this to, for example, map the organization on top.
Yeah.
That really depends on the criteria for validation that you came up with.
Yeah.
And taking that forward, we go to the next day, Thursday, where we prototype, and this is where we have a chance to look really, for example, at the details of the information technology that we need to change. So it might look like the blurry map in the background, which is blurry because it's an actual map from a client project that Annika did. We will sketch prototypes of screens, dashboards, customer touch points, look at different chunks of the Milky Way to validate things like the business model, functional requirements, information architecture, operational change, and so on. What kind of documents need to be produced. So really prototype everything we need in order to, on Friday, test, will it actually work, discuss it with key stakeholders, get feedback in a ritual descent kind of mode, simulate, like on the right, there are 2 guys from a sprint we did that simulate a chatbot interaction. So do everything or simulate and fake everything we need to and ask all the tough questions to see, will it actually work? Is this an idea that we want to pursue afterwards?
Yeah.
And afterwards, we will share all the results, might be in a huge exhibition with the team or the whole organization, might be on the intranet. Very important is to also preserve all the intermediate solutions that didn't make it through the hard selection funnel of a sprint. And one very practical thing we do there is take little videos of teams presenting them and putting them online so that the narrative behind a concept map like this is preserved, or behind a kind of complicated prototype, and share the knowledge in order to avoid one of the biggest traps of these kind of workshops, which is afterwards nothing happens. So being sure that the knowledge is shared and their responsibilities to take things forward. And also what helps is if there's already before the sprint a budget to actually implement the results that we validated. So that's how we do it. We have a shared vocabulary. We use a single map in rapid co-design sessions. we developed sprint flavors with Mumi, who also is on this call, to respond to typical situations that we find in enterprises, engaging large number of people, making a strategy more tangible, experimenting on the right solutions, or realizing a complex solutions, and this has or complicated solution, and this has an impact on who you invite, how long it is, and of course the activities that you actually do in a sprint. So the sprint is just one part, together with the stack and the scenarios of the enterprise design framework. There are 5 components, and if you are interested in this, you can download the enterprise design starter kit, where you have templates and canvases and exercises, and it's free, and you can get it on enterprisedesign.io. There's books to read if you want to learn more, like Intersection about enterprise design, the Milky Way book about maps, the maps we're using, the sprint book about running design sprints, and visualizing business transformation, about working with pictures and diagrams and using maps and models for enterprise transformation, which also features enterprise design and the Milky Way. That's it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And, do you have any comments, feedback, or questions?
I saw your question, Sally, in the chat.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I saw you'd answered it. Yeah. It seems to me, I mean, it's a very impressive amount of stuff to do in that that quite compressed time frame. Do you think it allows enough time? You know, if it's very full on working away intensively for a week, do you think it allows enough time for the brain to relax and get creative? Because the way the neuroscience of the brain works, the creativity says, oh, you concentrate on something, and then you go away and have a shower or something, and you have a brilliant idea. Yeah. And I wonder if there's enough of that if you're working at this intensity for a week.
I don't know. I think the idea is not to do this once. It's at least my experience, my hope that if we were to be able to do this more regularly, then we would be better in it, and we would have the thinking maybe between the different design sprints, and we would move into a really focused week or day or whatever, or days, depending on how much time we can do this, and really do this and have a go at it, and then zoom out again. But I think there's a valid point in pushing a lot into those days. You're probably very tired afterwards doing them. But what's your experience? You guys have done more through these design sprints than I have.
Yeah, I would say actually it's correct. I think it's important to see what the sprint is actually used for. It's not necessarily to come up with new ideas. That's usually happening, as you said, like in the shower or on the balcony, or and we all know that these kind of spaces are difficult and times are difficult to create. So the sprint is if you already have a challenge and maybe even ideas how to go about it and insights, you really want to bring people together to make a leap together on that's already defined and validated. So, and then of course, in this compressed time frame where you really try to force rapid progress, you try to make these spaces if you can. And one important point, for example, if we look at the 5-day model, that is the original sprint model from Jake Knapp and the GV people, the sprint runs from 10 to 4 each day. So it's not from 8 to 8. So that you're not trying to exhaust everyone, and you try to really make this room already for people who need to answer emails and stuff like that, but also for going home or taking a walk in the woods and really reflecting what are we doing here, and getting this kind of headspace that you need.
And one thing with this idea around the Milky Way and the anchor model is also that you do not need to understand all the details of all the different dimensions. We can meet on the idea with the map is you can meet on on the map in the capability. And then if you were a service designer, you would have a number of things in your head. And I was an architect or as a more technical person might have other things, but we could still know that we're talking about the same thing, but from different dimensions. And that's, I mean, there's so much energy going into all these discussions of whether I'm really understanding what you're talking about. You have a language that does not make sense in my world, because my world is kind of sorted in a different ways. That is one of the things that I have against the layer thing. You have one business layer which have one way of describing itself, and then you have the technology layer and the other, the information layer or whatever, that are drawn differently. And we are just creating more challenges for ourselves to get a shared understanding than these layers are actually giving us. So that's the point of this anchor model, where we could have the same structure but still see our own layers or our own perspectives. So hopefully that will make it easier for us to meet somewhere.
So you would create the anchor model as a separate exercise and then use that as the anchoring point for your design sprint.
Yeah, but we can also, I mean, because the point, if there is no model to start with, then it doesn't matter if I come with a model, nobody agrees on it and nobody understands it. So we need to come up with some kind of shared understanding of what is this anchor model. And we usually, we do that like we did with the students really fast, just sketching. You get the overall value flow and then you get the different sectors. And usually you're not going into detailed specification of what's going on. You're rather having, could we do this? Is this hard or not? And then after the sprint, I assume you go into more details. Like, how do we actually attack this in more? But when we have a model already there that people are aware of, then this is way much faster when you start with asking the question, what do we do with this?
Yeah.
I would say it really depends on the sprint flavor. So in an engagement sprint, making the model together might actually really help, but it might not be the most accurate one. But everyone is like, oh, cool, we now have a shared model. While in a realization sprint, you would probably develop or invest some time before to have a really good model, so that you can work with an accurate model in the sprint to figure out what needs to change. Yeah.
And I worked a lot at TUI for a number of years, and we did not use the design sprint technique, but we were able to do really fast first sketches, kind of like we do with the design sprints, where we did not have the structured process. And it was so fascinating how fast we could come up with, okay, this is what we need to do, to remove everything that has not to do with this challenge, and then just look at what do we need to understand and change. So I think there is a lot of opportunities here to speed things up and still have this shared understanding of what's going on.
Thanks. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up here. Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you, Annika, for doing this with me.
Yeah, thank you. And reach out to us if you have questions. Exactly. I'm happy to hear more thoughts and ideas and whether this makes sense. And I'd like to chip in something around the Milky Way. We're actually releasing a kit in the Miro, a template where you could get some base structures for Milky Ways in Miro. And there is a webinar on Monday if any of you are interested in knowing more. There's an English one at 8 o'clock Monday morning, where they present the templates and show some things around how you could do this in this tool, if you're interested, or just ping me. I'd like to know what you think.
Cool. Thank you. I will stop the sharing and the recording, but the cafe is still open.
Good. Yeah, I still have some coffee. Thank you so much.